tons of collectibles to find, but it did it with a unique setting and premise full of dragons and mythical creatures, as well as a trademark great Insomniac writing and humor. I think it's safe to say that PlayStation dominated this console generation. Now, I know there are some people that will argue that, but I mean, they dramatically outsold the competition. But history often runs in cycles, especially in gaming. And I'm really hoping that the PS5 doesn't end up being a bit of a disappointment the same way the PS3 was at its launch. Regardless, for this video, I want to take a trip through PlayStation history and check out 10 of Sony's best games throughout the years that gaming and me will never let you forget. What is up, everybody? Chaos here. Welcome to Chaos Gaming. Let's get into this. Let's go over some games that we will not let you forget that came from PlayStation. And in the comment section, you let me know what is your favorite PlayStation game of all time. We're going to start off with the Uncharted series. Now, this is a series that really blew up, and I don't think Sony or Naughty Dog was expecting it at all. It started as a PS3 exclusive back in 2007. It got solid reviews, it sold good, but when Uncharted 2 came along, everything changed. The sequel received critical acclaim for everything: the story, the gameplay, the characterization, everything, leading to Nathan Drake becoming a household name in the gaming world. Then we got Uncharted 3 and 4, and depending on who you are, you either loved or hated both of those games. But I'll let you hash that out in the comments below. They're both excellent games, but some Uncharted fans weren't on board with certain things that happened. Regardless of which games you do or don't like, Uncharted had a huge influence on the 8th generation of console gaming, and you can still feel that influence in pretty much every third-person action game right now. Many of them, well, they go for that blend of cover shooting and cinematic set pieces, just like Uncharted. At number 9, Jak and Daxter, the series. Does anybody remember these games? If you don't, you should. If you've never played them, you need to. They first debuted in 2001 on the PlayStation 2. Once again, developed by Naughty Dog. You played as Jak, a humanoid elf, which is cool, and Daxter, a weird otter-like thing, which is even cooler, as you went through various worlds and platform your way through them. Now, the first game was beloved for its graphics, humor, and variety, and it quickly led to the development of the sequel. Jak 2 launched in 2003, and then Jak 3 came in 2004, both receiving great reviews for their improved great gameplay and their more mature tone, which allowed Naughty Dog to get a bit more elaborate with the humor and the writing. There was a few more Jak and Daxter games like Jak X Combat Racing and a PSP exclusive just called Daxter, but none of those were able to recapture the greatness of the original trilogy. The first Jak and Daxter games are some of the best 3D platformers ever made, and if you still have a PS2 for some reason lying around, or maybe a PS2 emulator, I highly recommend giving them a playthrough. It's also fun to look at Naughty Dog's roots, considering what they went on to do a few years later. Speaking of 3D platformers, the Ratchet Clank series, the other big 3D platformer series from the PlayStation 2 era. Ratchet Clank was released for the PS2 in 2002. It was developed by Insomniac Games, another studio who went on to be one of Sony's big boys. Now, the game got great reviews for its level design. It had really good humor and action sequences, and of course, there was a sequel greenlit in 2003 called Going Commando. Then, in 2004, there was Up Your Arsenal, and then there were some other sequels with fun subtitles like Quest for Booty, Size Matters, and Full Frontal Assault. So in case you couldn't tell, Ratchet & Clank is a very funny series, blending great action with platforming, with funny writing and endearing characters. Sadly enough, though, it has kind of been on the back burner for a long time. The last game in the series was a reboot in 2016 that was met with okay reviews, but it wasn't as good as the originals. And now that Insomniac Games is probably working on a Spider-Man sequel, there's probably not going to be another time. I mean, there's not going to be another one anytime soon unless Sony hires another studio, which isn't likely. Next up is Spyro, the series. Let's stick with Insomniac Games now for this one. The original Spyro game, released all the way back in '98 for the PlayStation 1. It grabbed hold of the entire generation. It borrowed much of the foundation from games like Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, like the big, colorful hub worlds and tons of collectibles to find, but it did it with a unique setting and premise full of dragons and mythical creatures, as well as a trademark great Insomniac writing and humor. Now, Spyro was a huge success, and it spawned multiple sequels. From '98 to 2001, Spyro was one of Sony's main mascots, but then things fell apart in 2002. There was a slew of disappointing and flat-out bad Spyro games, and then eventually, Sony threw their hands up and replaced him with Skylanders. Now, thankfully, we did get the excellent Spyro Reignited trilogy in 2018 to let us relive those glory days, and I recommend playing it if you weren't into platformers back when Spyro was on top of the world. It's good. At number 6, Crash Bandicoot the entire series. You guys remember Naughty Dog? We talked about them twice already. This is the third time. Jak and Daxter wasn't the first 3D platforming franchise they made, because back in 1996, they made a little game for the PS1 called Crash Bandicoot. Now, the original got okay reviews, but it really caught on with what generation of gamers wanted. It sold over 6 million copies, that's extremely impressive for a brand new series back in the mid-90s. Naughty Dog then developed 2 sequels, as well as the extremely fun kart racer spin-off called Crash Team Racing. Now, Crash Bandicoot was not a super innovative series, all things considered, but what it did is it managed to take popular elements and aspects of the 3D platforming genre and bring it all together in a way that people adored. It is still, to this day, one of the most recognizable characters in Sony's IP library, and the remastered trilogy in 2017 sold great. At number 5 today, Shadow of the Colossus. This is a game that was way ahead of its time, and you can still feel its influence right now. Released for the PS2 back in 2005, almost 15 years ago. It was an adventure game developed by Team Ico. You played as a boy setting on a long journey to kill 16 giant monsters in return for the safety of a girl. Now, the story isn't anything to write home about until you get into the later sections, then it gets really good. But the main thing that people loved about the Shadow of the Colossus was the world design and the monster fights. Unlike any other action games at the time, there aren't any enemies to fight other than the giant monsters, essentially making the game a very fancy boss rush game. Now, each boss is expertly designed and forces you to get smart about your approaches. You have to use the environment to your advantage, and some of these fights, they took forever, making them all the more satisfying when you actually won. If you look back, this thing played great in 2005, and it actually still holds up to this day, and it had a huge influence on the way open world games and boss fights are designed. I mean, come on, it's remastered. You can go get it on the PS4. If you've never played it, go try it. At number 4, Metal Gear Solid 3. Now, MGS is one of the most beloved franchises in gaming history. And when you talk about the best of the best, most people will say MGS 3 was the highest point, the peak for the franchise. You let me know if that's right or wrong. Released in late 2004, it was a PlayStation 2 exclusive. It took place in the 60s, and much of the story had you exploring various jungles and natural sites as opposed to the high-tech facilities of the other Metal Gear titles. It was also extremely impressive visually for its time, and honestly, it's still extremely impressive visually today. Now, it doesn't look as amazing, but compared to other games that were out at that time, it's pretty good. Then you have the trademark excellent writing of the Metal Gear series, and perhaps the best story that Hideo Kojima has ever written. MGS 3 is still considered one of the best games ever made, and I think it was worthy of a top 5 spot. At number 3, Kingdom Hearts 2. Now, this is a franchise that's been around for some time, and there's been a whole bunch of games, but most people will point to Kingdom Hearts 2 as the best. Released for the PS2 in late 2005, you once again played as Sora. You teamed up with a lot of the main Disney players, jumped through various worlds like Mulan, Beauty and the Beast, Pirates of the Caribbean, and tons of others. The gameplay was improved from the first, which it should have been. Story was a tad bit more understandable, which it should have been. I think even the biggest Kingdom Hearts fans will admit the first game's story, it was screwy. Now, the game was praised for everything: visuals, gameplay, as well as its amazing soundtrack and Square Enix's ability to bring these beloved Disney worlds to life in such an engaging way, which really hit all the right nostalgia bells. Kingdom Hearts 2 was one of the best reviewed games on the PS2, and soon people on the Xbox will finally get a chance to play it. The series is getting a port over to Xbox. Next up is The Last of Us, and I'm sure you guys are probably getting tired of hearing about this game. Okay, released for the PS3, 2013. Then it was remastered for the PS4. Naughty Dog, come on. I mean, you're Joel, you're the smuggler, world ravaged by a horrific virus, turning people into zombies or something, right? Okay, you have to protect Ellie. You guys know it. You know the story. You're ready for The Last of Us 2. This game was so well written, so well presented. It was a natural progression of the Uncharted games. third-person action, cover shooting, but with more detailed inventory and stealth systems to better fit this world. The Last of Us is one of the best reviewed games of the decade, and I don't know if I agree with people calling it the best game of the last 10 years. It's up there, but it's one of the most influential games that Sony has ever released, and it would be wrong not to keep it on this list. Now, lately, I've tried to do controversial hot take picks for number one, and I think I've got one here. God of War the series. It's going to be a little controversial, but I think if we're picking out Sony's best franchise that had the biggest impact on gaming, it's hard not to go with God of War. The original was released for the PS2 in 2005, and it saw 2 direct sequels, a couple spin-offs, and then a full reboot in 2018. Now, the original trilogy had a major impact on the industry. It popularized hack and slash games. It showed what could be done with graphics and huge landscapes. Then, you fast forward a decade to 2018, and you've got the rebooted God of War for the PS4, which is one of the most critically acclaimed games of the entire generation, and it's going to have a huge impact on third-person action games in the future. God of War has shown it's a franchise not only capable of influencing the industry, but also reinventing itself and influencing the industry again. It is a series that can be mindless action, it can be over-the-top violence, or it can be more reserved and sensitive with storytelling. It can do whatever it wants. It's not going anywhere. It remains relevant. And if you ask me, God of War is the most important Sony franchise, and it's more than deserving of the number one spot today. You let me know where I got it right and wrong. Let me know one Sony game that you don't want anybody to ever forget. There are 2 videos on the screen, a blue and a red. I want you to click the red one today, and I'll see you over there.